Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 2 Earth, Episode 20, Crossroads of Destiny, finishing up Book 2. Animated by JM Animation, of course. And yeah, finale time. It's a big finale with what happens. The ending, of course, and the fact that it's a full, complete loss for our heroes is obviously this massive thing that it has going for it. I think for sure there are, you can make calls for like, oh, maybe the book one and book 3 finale are kind of better than it, so it kind of ends up being like, in a way, sort of the weakest of the 3 finales. But it depends on how much, I suppose, you put on the idea of like a more negative kind of end of a book versus a more positive end to a book, in that the book 3 has obviously the full victory, the complete success of all the characters' journeys going for it. The book 1 finale has the fact that it's this massive, big kind of battle, and again, some really big moments. But either way, this is a very, very good episode with a lot of big moments that happen. Obviously, the big thing, when you really break down, is Zuko's decision, because when you get down to it, there is that moment right in the middle of the fight that's happening right towards the end, where they all run out into that kind of open kind of catacomb area with the water, and it's Aang and Katara versus Azula. And you can tell from the way she looks that she knows if she gets no backup, she can't handle the two of them on her own. That she knows that, she's at risk of losing that fight. She'll put up an excellent fight, but against Katara and Aang together, she pretty much knows that she is in danger. And then when Zuko walks in, because she's just been through attempting to manipulate him and say, make up your own choice, don't listen to what Iroh has to say, make up your own choice, you can still be redeemed in Father's eyes. When he comes out, she knows that depending on Zuko, this could either be a complete loss for her, because she kind of knows that if Zuko sides with the opposition, she is at a bit of a risk, because of the amount of powerful benders on their side, that it is going to be a much more equal battle than it ends up turning out to be. And especially with the nature of how everything goes in terms of like Sokka, and like Toph is with Sokka, so Aang's team doesn't have like such a powerful bender like Toph. Maybe things would have went differently if Toph and Sokka were both present in that kind of main battle area. But it just this is how it turned out, and yeah, like without Zuko siding with Azula in all of this and wanting that final chance to get his honor back, basically, her plan could have kind of gone completely wrong. So it's that one moment of just this amazing plan, complete control, and just how well it was working out otherwise. How she managed to take over the Dai Li, take control from Long Feng, and just immediately eliminate him from the kind of political game. The one thing kind of standing in the way of that was Zuko and what decision he would make on everything that was going on. And I liked it because you had Iroh finally, I think, make a decision with Zuko, because with Zuko, apart from the like Lao Guy stuff where he was kind of like, what are you doing? Like, he just kind of got angry at Zuko. He's never properly kind of just said, no, Zuko, you kind of now have to make this decision. But he comes out here and says that, look, they helped me to find you. You've been saved by them before in the past. They're not really your enemies. You've been through enough. You've changed enough. You have to make a decision now, a big decision now. And Iroh's basically saying, I think you should side with good. And in that case, he's basically saying, I think you should side with Aang, side with the Avatar, and defend Ba Sing Se in this case. Don't assist Azula. And it's such an interesting dynamic, because Iroh kind of understands that he can see the potential that Zuko has to be this very different approach for the Fire Nation going forward, because obviously one of the key reveals within Book 3 for Zuko is that basically Iroh, going into the finale, says that, I consider you to be the right person to lead the Fire Nation going forward. And that's such a big thing for Zuko that gives him so much confidence going into that kind of final confrontation. But what we get here is just so well done. There's a lot of nice dynamics here, like going back earlier in the episode. They obviously go to serve tea to the Earth King. Azula walks out, and I love how Azula always underestimates Iroh. She should know, but because she's so dismissive of him and his usual personality, she never really accounts for just how powerful he is. And it's probably one of the few weaknesses that Azula ever shows in terms of analyzing anyone. Because she's been bested by Iroh before. One of the only characters that has really continuously bested her has been Iroh. With regards to obviously the first confrontation at the start of this book with the lightning redirection, and then here, him surprising everyone with the breathing fire technique here, it speaks to this idea of is she not really aware that Iroh is probably the most powerful firebender present there? That obviously debates can be made about just who is the top firebender, but a lot of fans would definitely make the case that Iroh is absolutely there and thereabouts with regards to best firebenders. And the fact that Azula can't quite see that, I think, is quite telling. In that, even just when she has the Dai Li capture him, she just walks off and kind of leaves them there. That she doesn't put a ton of security on him and doesn't place so much importance on him in the fight, because the reason Katara is able to escape with Aang in the end is because Iroh comes in to defend them. And his power to hold everyone off for so long gives them that chance of basically saves the war basically for the good side. So a lot of big moments. The definitely I think a lot of unique fights that take place here. Just with regards to key moments of I think Aang in this episode kind of shows that he has three elements and is more or less mastered three elements, but I think you can tell he sort of struggles with when to use each element, how to approach each attack and situation with regards to the elements that he has. I think the weakness and the mistakes that he makes in this fight are actually over-relying on earthbending, because you can see a bunch of times in this fight he goes for a big earth attack, whether that be to block something with an earth wall or charge at someone with earth armor, and he constantly gets blown back by powerful firebending. Whereas I think earlier in the book, where Aang only had one or two elements, he would have just maybe airbending avoided that attack and then countered with waterbending or airbending. Earthbending of course is useful, but in this scenario you almost felt like he underutilized two of his three elements. And kind of that was the problem here, because on the other side of things you had Katara show just how powerful she is here by being able to basically best Azula here in one-on-one combat, that she got the advantage. It's a short fight, so it's hard to put a lot of focus on what happens, but she very clearly gets the advantage in that brief scuffle that they have. Similarly, Zuko also shows just how powerful he is. A few of the moves he uses, the fire whips and that really powerful blast that he does, clearly shows a level of growth compared to where he was, or even earlier on in the season. And considering he hasn't had that much of a chance to practice his firebending, it just speaks to how he has just in general grown as a character and is able to, I think, combat Aang more effectively, in the sense of he's always had power, and when he's been able to hit Aang, he clearly has a power advantage over Aang. But often in trying to attack Aang would make all these mistakes by being too aggressive, whereas here it felt like he was able to really direct it kind of correctly and get an advantage over Aang. So just overall really impressive, and I think the main thing to take away from this was that it showed that as powerful as Azula is, she is still just one person, and that this was probably one of the longest showcases of Azula still has a ways to go herself, that she required the help of Zuko and the Dai Li as well, because you could tell towards the end of the fight Aang was kind of starting to get very intense and get more into it, and that if the Dai Li hadn't interfered with his big attack, you kind of got the sense he was about to go, triple element kind of crazy on them. But the core of what happens here is that Aang is forced into making that big decision with the Guru, with the last episode in mind, and that is, he sees Katara there, she's surrounded by Dai Li agents, he's surrounded by everyone, and the decision that he has to make basically is, does he go over to help Katara right now and basically put everything at risk for her, or does he decide there and then, create a defensive structure, unlock the final chakra, use the Avatar state, and potentially have a chance to, basically win this whole battle, but potentially have Katara get hurt or injured. And he makes the decision here. He says, sorry, Katara, but it is him showing that level of growth, that he's moving his whole thing with attachments from being this major flaw to just being still an aspect of him, but something that he can get past when he needs to. Kind of obviously in a way like the difference between, like, say, Anakin and Aang, who kind of ultimately have similar character flaws. Anakin from Star Wars, of course. The idea of, like, Anakin was never able to kind of really let go of his attachments, whereas Aang here is at least capable of doing it to a degree, enough to, I suppose, understand the idea of what the seventh chakra is about, and the idea that you can still love and care for someone while not being, like, attached to them, and so on. And it was just a really interesting approach to that he just does it here. That it wasn't this massive thing that he was just never going to do. And so he goes into the Avatar state more or less. Obviously there's a technicality here, because obviously we know, it's later confirmed, Aang actually dies for a minute or so here. That when he's hit, he basically is more or less killed on the spot. And it's not until Katara heals him with the spirit water that he's actually revived again. He does actually die for a second. And everyone brings the point, but, like, wait, if he dies in the Avatar state, then the Avatar, cycle should end. And the main difference here is that Aang doesn't fully go into the Avatar state. So the impact ultimately here is that what happens is that he takes the hit, so his body takes the hit, his body's damaged. And because he was sort of merged with Rava, Rava takes some of the hit as well, but isn't destroyed kind of at the same time, which breaks that connection. Instead, kind of what happens is that, obviously there is some connection going on here, so the connection between Aang and Rava is damaged, which is where the Escape from the Spirit World webcomic comes in, that Aang meets all the other avatars to reconnect, and then the whole kind of subtle arc throughout book 3 is about the physical healing of Aang, and the idea that he has all this energy inside him, and spiritually he's fixed it, he's unlocked all the chakras. It's just that physically his chakras are kind of blocked by damage to his body still, that only opens in the final battle. So it's a kind of very technical kind of thing that happens here, but the idea is that a few seconds later, and Azula probably would have killed Aang in the Avatar state, or else the Avatar state would have activated and done something to block or counter Azula's lightning blast. She hits him just as, like, the connection is about to be made, like it's 95% there, and so it more or less has a similar effect to destroying the Avatar's what am I trying to say here, the Avatar cycle, but it basically is this kind of delayed thing, because the setup for Escape from the Spirit World is effectively that if Aang doesn't connect with his 4 previous past lives, he will lose the connection. So the idea is that it was hurt enough that it could have happened, the cycle could have ended, but that it was not connected enough that, like, there was just nothing Aang could do. So Aang had a way to actually get past this, and that's obviously what happens here, and he's obviously healed later on. And you obviously end it with this really kind of dark kind of ending. It's a really negative ending of, like, we as fans know Zuko's made the wrong choice, betraying Iroh, going against everything he's kind of learned for in this book. That's been his whole arc. He's made the wrong choice here in siding with Azula, and he kind of realizes it immediately after it's happened, that he's not as happy as maybe he thought he would have been, being successful in everything that happened. And then on the Allied side of things, they get away, they bring the king with them. Aang is still alive, there's hope, but the Earth Kingdom has fallen. Ba Sing Se has fallen in what happened here. And it's a very dark moment of like the war kind of is over now in a way, that there's very few people left to oppose the Fire Nation in everything that's happening here. So it's very kind of powerful how it ends. The only other, I suppose, key scene I haven't talked about yet is the Katara Zuko scene in the catacombs. It's obviously a weird one in that some people obviously interpret it as being romantic, whereas I kind of really struggle with that, just because this is basically Zuko and Katara's first time talking to each other where they're not fighting each other. So my interpretation of this is always that this is Katara realizing that there is more to Zuko than being a Fire Nation bad guy, and realizing, kind of like Aang already knows, that there is something to Zuko, that in the same way that in like the Blue Spirit at the end, Aang kind of brings up the question of, like, if things were different, could we have been friends? And it's kind of Katara realizing the same thing, that in the same way that she's been hurt by the war, she may not think it, but Zuko has been hurt by the war, that scar came from, his father, but, his own people in a way. It came from a firebender. His mother, obviously, he kind of implies without telling her exactly that something relating to the Fire Nation took his own mother away, and she can make that connection and understand that there's a, similar but different, emotion within Zuko that relates to the Fire Nation as well. And she realizes that she's, like, as she says, she's always interpreted like the face of the Fire Nation as Zuko, and it's here where she realizes that even Zuko isn't like that connected to the Fire Nation, because one of the big things that you kind of bring up in this point is that like Team Avatar don't really are never fully aware basically of Zuko's affiliation to the Fire Nation. We as the audience know that he's banished. They, for the most part, don't really, and I can't even remember, like, there's no specific moment. I know there's never really a reveal where like Aang is like, wait, Zuko's banished? When did that happen? It's just kind of this thing that they end up kind of realizing behind the scenes, and maybe are told off screen and don't really react to it. It's just this idea that they gradually over time realize that, okay, Zuko's with the Fire Nation, but he's not getting the same level of support that you'd expect of someone who's the prince. And that, like, they never really say it as such, but they clearly must know that there's something up here. And I think it's Katara maybe making some of those connections, and that Zuko's on the run here as well. Azula's been after him as well. We've seen situations where they've sided with Zuko against Azula in the chase, and it's kind of I think a lot of those things coming into play here, where she realizes that he is not the face of the enemy that they really should have. That their enemy is Ozai. And even Zuko is conflicted about that, to the point where she's kind of willing to, in a way, use that spirit water on his scar, if it meant kind of, I suppose, him siding with them in a way, that she sees this idea that maybe they could be friends. I do think it's ultimately, a lot of that scene is meant to more set up the idea of like, what if Katara had used it on Zuko and he had still betrayed them, then Aang would be dead. And I think a lot of that goes into why Katara is so annoyed at Zuko, especially when Zuko obviously returns to them in book 3. Of like, I think that's part of the key to this, that she was willing to trust him before anyone else. He betrayed that trust, and if things had been waited a little bit longer, Aang could be dead over all of this stuff that happened, and I think that plays a key factor. Again, I don't really see any of it as romantic, just because, like, ultimately the development here is Katara going from, I see you as the face of evil, to, actually, I can relate to you in some ways. We have similarities. You are not that evil person I thought you were. And that, to me, doesn't really equate at all to, romance. So, it's obviously a talking point you kind of have to talk about, because it's so often this scene is brought up as that, when it really isn't. But yeah, that's my review for the book 2 finale. And yeah, we'll move basically straight on to book 3. I'll do probably one more review video this week. I'll start off book 3 with The Awakening later on in the week. But yeah, that's been the review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode. Yeah, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.